So, welcome to my talk about digital nudges for access reviews, guiding deciders to revoke excessive access. My name is Thomas Baumer, and I wrote this paper together with my colleagues, Tobias Reittinger, Sascha, Kern, and Günther Pernul, for which Günther Pernul is our supervisor, and the others are PhD students. Sascha and I, we work at Nexis for the industry, focusing on access control. Today, I want to introduce to you access reviews and its underlying problem. So first, we will understand this problem. Second, we will guide you to our expert interviews, as we ask our experts for how to apply digital nudges on access reviews. Third, we applied one selected digital nudge, choice defaults, in a user study to study its exact effect. And fourth, I will talk about my major takeaways, and I have a little request for you. So basically, access reviews, we formalized the problem and the term access review within our paper using confusion metrics. Basically, on the left side, you have security policies, which are access control policies which should be there, like the aim we are targeting at, and authorizations are things like roles, which actually implement these security policies. In that case, you can have two types of errors. First is false negatives. It's on the upper right side. Those are access errors like missing authorizations. So you should be able to access a certain service, but you can't. Usually those are really annoying because you are stopped from doing your task, but they are not that security relevant. Much more relevant are the false positives. False positive are excessive access. So maybe you got some access right which you really shouldn't have, like changing your boss's job description or something like that. So these we need to have an eye on it. So the primary goal for access reviews is to reduce excessive access, so the false positives. And we ask our experts how big they think the chunk of excessive access is in organizations. And they responded in about 20% to 25% excessive access, which is quite high. To better understand it, it's not about the problem itself. Access reviews have also accompanying challenges. 10 years ago, Jafiri et al. Published at SOUPS a paper about it. They compiled 5 major problems. I will quickly glance over them for you. The first one is scale. In access reviews in large organizations, you quickly have to review about 6 or 7-figure numbers of authorizations because it's big. Second challenge is lack of knowledge. If you are in a big organization, you have to remind that there's not one guy who has the overview of everything, but you have multiple people who have the overview of smaller parts. And maybe you don't even have the knowledge in your organization what authorization actually does what and why has a certain person the access to what it has. Third, frequency. It's a process you don't only start once and can forget about it afterwards. It's more about you have to ask your experts regularly, so maybe yearly or even quarterly. I know cases for quarterly. Fourth, human errors. Since this is a process which is driven by human deciders, human errors are common. Imagine a manager who has to decide over the access of his employees. Maybe he doesn't have really time for it, and he does it on a Friday afternoon. So on Friday afternoon, he wants to go home quickly. So he might be a little bit faster and so making more errors, which is a human thing. Fifth, exceptional cases. It's based on the scale of the access reviews when rare phenomena become more common, like parental leave or sickness. So you have to remind that even rare things can happen more frequently in that scale. So that's for the access review problem and its challenges. We asked our experts to reflect on which digital nudges could help during an access review. For that, we asked them about 13 digital nudges. We took them from taxonomy of Jesse and Janach, and then we asked them for the 5 challenges I presented before. So to reflect on each nudge and each challenge, giving us a rating based on a 5-point Likert scale. So we can compile here a nice overview on the right side. And we also asked them to reason about their choice. So we had much interview material, which we compiled in the paper. You can read it in detail in the PDF. My major takeaways for that: most digital nudges seem promising to help, basically, but we need to be careful about them. So we need to actually study them more to understand the concrete effects. Basically, the experts also reminded every time that those are educated guesses here. So for understanding the real effects, we actually have to study it more. That's what we did. We applied one digital nudge in a user study using the choice defaults. For that, we grouped 102 participants in 3 groups, 34 each, and presented them one configuration of the nudge each. The first configuration was presenting them a pre-selection with everything is already accepted. The second group was everything is already rejected. And the third group was a neutral configuration with no pre-selection at all. Then the participants had to review 160 authorizations based on a case study, so they knew which one should be correct and which one not. These 160 authorizations was split exactly in the half. Like 50% of these authorizations was excessive access, and the other 50% was actually correct. Our observations within the user studies were the decisions the participants made and the time consumption they needed to complete the task. We also could measure the accuracy and errors they did, since we knew which authorizations are correct and which one were incorrect. After the study, we asked our deciders to do a self-assessment based on the NASA Task Load Index. With that, we could query how the performance self-assessment, the frustration level, or the mental demand was. Our major takeaways of the study were first the influence on decisions. So the choice default nudge worked actually. For example, for the default reject, we received more revokes on access. But that's kind of important, the deciders did not blindly follow the nudge. It was a concern in the interviews that the users might just take the default and do not actually do the decisions themselves. That was not the case, actually. Second, the deciders' perception. The nudged group both had a reduced stress perception, so mental demand and frustration level went down, which is a good thing for the nudges. And overall, over all groups, the participant had a reasonable performance perspective. So since we could compare the objective accuracy they achieved and their own performance self-assessment, those values actually correlated quite neatly. So we can see that there is some alignment. Also, some other measurements, we achieved time saves for the nudged group because the users didn't have clicked so much. These time saves were up to 24%. But it's also worth noting that quality improvement was not out of the box. In hindsight, it's not surprising since the default configurations exactly pre-selected half of the decisions wrong because we split up the groups that way. The nudge actually didn't improve quality. To improve quality, you need something like smart defaults so that you actually, the nudge already pre-selects correct decisions. So my takeaways and request. Basically, there's a belief in practice that you cannot help deciders in access reviews very much because it would influence the decisions. I think it's not very true because they think the deciders are more hyper-rational beings. I think it's not the case, those are humans. So ignoring human facts here is a bad idea. And I think we can do a better job if we partition the decisions better, for example, by using smart default nudges to actually ask better questions for the deciders. And finally, my request. I think access reviews are not very well studied in science. We worked on foundations for that, but I think we can improve a lot here. So feel free to challenge this study and make it better. I would love to read more studies on access reviews, basically. We also published all of our data and decisions the users made, open access, under the following link. You can also find it in the paper. So thank you for your attention, and feel free to contact me and discuss with me.